Tonight, an invisible woman will destroy a billion-dollar empire with a single word. Evelyn Hart stood in the shadows of Manhattan's most luxurious restaurant, her hand trembling as she clutched a wine flask. Before her, two powerful tycoons were about to sign a multi-billion-dollar deal. But she realized something no one else saw. A legal trap identical to the one that had destroyed her life 5 years earlier. In a few seconds, she would have to choose: remain silent and live peacefully, or speak up and confront those who had wiped her from the face of the earth. Follow the story to the end, like and comment where you're watching to let me know how far this story has progressed. Now, let's begin. The rain hammered against the windows of Bellacore like accusations. Inside, the restaurant glowed with the kind of light that cost more than most people earned in a year. Soft amber from chandeliers that hung like frozen tears, white linen that had never known a stain, silverware so polished you could see your failures reflected back. Evelyn Hart moved through it all like smoke. 34 years old, thin in a way that spoke of skipped meals rather than discipline, hair pulled back so tight it gave her headaches she'd stopped noticing. Her uniform was black, always black, and it fit her the way silence fits a held breath. Invisible, forgettable, exactly what she needed to be. She'd been a ghost for 5 years now. 5 years of carrying trays, pouring wine, smiling without showing teeth. 5 years of existing in the margins of other people's power while her own collected dust in a past she'd buried so deep she sometimes forgot it had been real. Tonight was supposed to be like every other night. Serve the food, collect the tips, go home to her studio apartment in Queens where the heating didn't work, and the neighbors fought through walls thin as promises. Sleep, repeat. The routine had become armor, and she wore it without complaint. But the universe has a sixth sense of timing. Table 12 needs attention. Marcus, the floor manager, appeared at her elbow. He was 26, ambitious, and treated the waitstaff like interchangeable parts in a machine he was desperate to prove he could operate. Voss party, private dining room. They've been in there for 2 hours already. Evelyn felt something cold slide down her spine. Damien Voss? You know another Voss who rents out our entire back room on a Tuesday? Marcus checked his tablet, already moving on to the next problem. They're finalizing something big. Don't interrupt unless they signal. Don't make small talk. Don't even breathe loud. Voss doesn't like distractions. She nodded. Picked up the wine, a 2015 Chateau Margaux that cost more than her monthly rent. Her hands were steady. They were always steady now. She'd trained them to be. The private dining room sat behind a door of frosted glass that turned the world beyond into watercolor suggestions. Evelyn knocked twice. Soft, professional, and entered when a voice inside said something that might have been permission. The room smelled like expensive cologne and the particular silence that comes with serious money. 8 men sat around a table made of wood so dark it looked like solidified night. Most of them she didn't recognize, lawyers probably, or the kind of executives who got paid to nod at the right moments. But 2 of them she knew, not personally. Nobody knew them personally. You knew them the way you knew about hurricanes or market crashes, as forces that shaped the world whether you wanted them to or not. Damien Voss sat at the head of the table. 48 years old, built like someone who'd forgotten how to relax, with gray eyes that moved like calculation itself. He wore a suit that had been cut by someone who understood that real power doesn't announce itself. His hands were folded on the table, and even in stillness, he looked like potential violence waiting for coordinates. Across from him sat Caleb Mercer, younger, maybe 42, with the kind of face that had probably been handsome before ambition carved it into something sharper. Sandy hair going gray at the temples in a way that looked planned. A smile that he wore like other men wore watches, always visible, never quite reaching its intended function. Evelyn had seen his face before, in newspapers, in business journals that she'd stopped reading after her life imploded. Caleb Mercer, founder of Vail and Emerson Advisory, the legal consulting firm that Fortune 500 companies called when they needed problems to disappear without mess. She moved to the table with the practiced invisibility of someone who'd learned that being noticed usually meant being blamed. Started pouring wine at the far end, working her way toward the center. Essentially bulletproof, Mercer was saying, his voice smooth as the wine she was pouring. The arbitration clause ensures that any disputes remain private. No public litigation, no media circus. Everything stays clean. Damien didn't respond immediately. He had a document in front of him, thick, bound, dense with legal text that probably took teams of lawyers months to craft. His finger traced a line of text, then stopped. And if things go wrong? His voice was quiet. Not soft. Quiet. Like thunder in the distance. Mercer's smile widened a fraction. Then the structure protects you. The subsidiary arrangement means your core holdings remain untouchable. If there's liability, it dies at the corporate boundary. You walk away clean. Evelyn reached Mercer's glass, poured. Her eyes flicked to the document, just for a second, just the way they'd trained her not to in her old life, when reading contracts had been her purpose instead of her curse. She saw it. Section 14.7, subsection C. Arbitration Selection Protocol with unilateral appointment rights. The kind of language that looked neutral until you understood what it actually did. Her hand didn't shake. She'd gotten good at that. But something inside her chest started to crack, and she could feel the fissure spreading like ice on a windshield. She knew this clause, word for word. She'd seen it 5 years ago in a different contract, in a different office, when she'd still been someone who believed that pointing out corruption would be celebrated rather than punished. She'd been 29 then, a contract analyst at Morrison & Cale, one of the most prestigious corporate law firms in New York. Not a partner track position. She'd known that ceiling existed. But good work. Important work. The kind that made her parents proud even if they didn't entirely understand what she did. She'd been reviewing a merger agreement for a pharmaceutical company when she'd found it. The same poisoned language buried in section after section. Arbitration clauses that guaranteed the company could never lose a dispute because they controlled who judged it. Liability shields that meant when people got hurt, nobody with money would ever pay. She'd reported it. To her supervisor. Then to the ethics committee. Then, when nothing happened, to someone she thought she could trust at the SEC. 3 weeks later, she'd been fired. Not for reporting it, they were smarter than that. For gross misconduct, fabricated email evidence, forged documents, allegations that appeared so suddenly and disappeared so completely into her personnel file that fighting them felt like punching smoke. Within a month, she couldn't get hired anywhere. Not at a law firm, not at a consulting group, not even as a paralegal at cut-rate practices in bad neighborhoods. Her name had been poisoned with a precision that felt almost artistic. Morrison & Cale had connections, but behind them, funding their defense, orchestrating her destruction with the kind of efficiency that spoke of practice, had been Vail and Emerson Advisory, had been Caleb Mercer. Now, 5 years later, she was standing 3 feet from him, invisible in her black uniform, holding a bottle of wine that cost more than her security deposit, while he prepared to do to Damien Voss exactly what he'd done to her. Evelyn finished pouring Mercer's wine, moved to Damien's glass. The beauty of the structure, Mercer continued, is that it creates perfect legal insulation. You get all the upside of the partnership without any meaningful exposure. My team spent 6 months building these protections. Damien picked up the pen. Expensive, the kind that probably had a name and a heritage. He held it the way other men held weapons. Evelyn poured his wine. Her hands were still steady. That was the worst part. How steady they were, even as every instinct she'd buried started screaming. This wasn't her problem. This wasn't her world. She'd tried fighting once, and it had destroyed her. Damien Voss was a billionaire surrounded by lawyers and security and people whose entire careers depended on protecting him. He didn't need a washed-up analyst who now served wine for minimum wage. Besides, what did she owe him? What did she owe anyone in this room, these men who moved through life like gravity didn't apply to them, who built empires on the backs of people they'd never see? Damien clicked the pen. The sound was small but somehow loud in the focused quiet of the room. Evelyn stepped back, put the bottle on the serving cart, started to turn toward the door, and stopped. Because she could see what was about to happen. Not psychically, practically. She'd spent 4 years learning how these contracts worked, how the language folded back on itself, how clauses that looked like protection were actually traps designed to spring shut the moment you needed them most. Damien Voss was about to sign away his leverage without knowing it. Within 6 months, maybe a year, Mercer would activate the hidden architecture, start disputes he knew he'd win, force Damien into arbitration he controlled, and Damien would lose, not because he was wrong, but because the contract guaranteed he couldn't be right. She'd seen it before, watched it happen to 3 different companies before she'd reported it. watched it happen to her. The smart move was to leave, keep her head down, stay invisible. But Evelyn had been invisible for 5 years, and it had cost her everything except the ability to recognize a trap when she saw one. Her voice came out before she could stop it. Not loud. She didn't know how to be loud anymore, but clear. That clause is a trap. The room didn't explode. That would have been dramatic. Instead, it froze. The kind of freeze that happens when reality suddenly diverges from script, when the furniture starts talking, when the ghost decides to be seen. Every head turned. 8 men, various stages of surprise and confusion and dawning annoyance. Damien Voss set down his pen. Slowly. The way you'd move around something dangerous. His gray eyes found her, and for the first time in 5 years, Evelyn felt genuinely seen. Not glanced at. Not processed. Seen. "Excuse me?" His voice was still quiet, still dangerous. Evelyn's heart was trying to break out of her chest, but her voice stayed level. 5 years of serving people who treated her like decoration had taught her how to speak through fear. Section 14.7, subsection C, the arbitration clause. It's designed to fail. Caleb Mercer laughed. It was a good laugh, warm, surprised, the kind designed to deflate tension. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Perhaps you should—" "The unilateral appointment rights," Evelyn continued, and now her voice was stronger because she was on familiar ground, even if the ground was made of knives. "The language gives you sole authority to select arbitrators if disputes arise, which means Mr. Voss has no actual recourse regardless of the validity of his position." The smile on Mercer's face didn't fade, but something behind it went very still. Damien hadn't moved. His eyes stayed on Evelyn, and she could feel the weight of his attention like pressure on her skin. "Who are you?" He asked it like the question mattered. "Nobody." The word came out before she could think. I used to be a contract analyst before." "Before what?" She almost laughed. "Before I made the mistake of pointing out this exact clause to the wrong people." Mercer stood. He did it smoothly, but there was nothing smooth about the energy that came with it. "Damien, this is clearly some kind of—" "Sit down, Caleb." Damien didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. The command landed like physics. Mercer sat. The smile was gone now. Damien pushed his chair back, stood. He was tall. She'd known that academically, but standing 3 feet from him, she felt it. "Explain." Evelyn's throat was dry. "The clause looks standard. Professional arbitration in case of disputes. Neutral party selection, except the language in subsection C gives sole appointment rights to the party who initiates the dispute, which means whoever moves first controls the outcome." "And you think I wouldn't be the one to move first?" "It doesn't matter who moves first. The secondary language in Section 18.3 creates mandatory mediation triggers tied to performance metrics that only Mr. Mercer's side defines. He can force a dispute whenever he wants, and because he initiates it, he controls who judges it." Silence. The kind that feels like held breath. One of the lawyers cleared his throat. That's an extremely aggressive interpretation." "It's not an interpretation." Evelyn looked at him, then back at Damien. "It's what the contract does. I've seen it before. Vail and Emerson has used this exact structure in at least 7 major deals over the past 6 years. They win every arbitration. Not most. Every single one." Mercer's face had gone very still. "This is absurd." "Damien, this woman clearly has some kind of agenda," Evelyn finished for him. "I do. I don't want to watch you do to him what you did to me." "And what did I do to you?" Mercer's voice had changed, still smooth but colder now, clinical. "You buried me 5 years ago. Morrison and Kale. I was the analyst who reported the Mercroft Pharma contracts. You remember, the ones with the arbitration fraud?" She watched recognition flicker across his face, just for a second. Then it was gone, replaced by professional concern. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Her hands were shaking now. She didn't care. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. You funded Morrison and Kale's defense. You coached them through the process of destroying my career so completely that I ended up serving wine to men who wouldn't hire me to clean their bathrooms." Damien raised a hand. Everyone stopped talking. The power of it was almost beautiful, how a single gesture could rewrite reality. He looked at Mercer. Is she right about the clause? It's a standard protection. I didn't ask if it was standard. I asked if she's right. The room felt like it was running out of air. Mercer spread his hands. The clause is designed to protect both parties. Caleb? Just the name, nothing else. But it landed like a sentence. Mercer's jaw tightened. The structure is aggressive. Yes, that's what you pay me for. Protection. Protection that I control? Or protection that you control? The language is, there's nuance. Answer the question. Caleb Mercer was one of the most powerful legal consultants in New York. He'd built a firm that Fortune 500 companies trusted with their darkest secrets. He was sitting across from a client who'd paid him millions, but under Damien Voss's stare, he looked like a student called on in class without the answer. The appointment rights flow to the initiating party, he said finally, which creates leverage that can be weaponized, Evelyn finished quietly. Damien didn't look at her, kept his eyes on Mercer. How long have you been planning to use that leverage? This is a misunderstanding. How long, Caleb? The silence stretched, thinned, broke. You would have had 18 months, Mercer said finally. His voice had changed. No more warmth, just cold math. Maybe 2 years. Time to integrate the operations, transfer key assets. Then we'd have triggered the performance reviews, found deficiencies, moved to arbitration. By the time you understood what was happening, the structure would have already shifted, and I'd have lost everything. You'd have lost control. There's a difference. Damien nodded slowly, like a teacher acknowledging a particularly honest answer from a student who'd just failed the course. Get out. Mercer blinked. Damien, take your lawyers, take your contract. Get out of my restaurant. If you think you can just walk away from this deal, I can. Damien's voice was quieter now. That made it worse. I own this building. I own the security company outside. I own enough pieces of this city that I can make your next 6 months very educational. So I'm going to say this once. Get out. For 5 seconds, Caleb Mercer looked like he might argue. Then he looked at Damien's face and made a better choice. He stood, gathered his documents with hands that were almost steady. The lawyers scrambled to follow, chairs scraping, papers rustling, the small chaos of powerful men realizing they'd lost ground they thought was guaranteed. At the door, Mercer stopped, looked back at Evelyn. You should have stayed quiet, he said. Not threatening, just observational. You were safe when you were invisible. Then he was gone, and the room was empty except for Damien Voss and the waitress who'd just destroyed a billion-dollar deal. Evelyn stood there waiting for her heart to restart. Her hands were shaking badly now. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was draining away, leaving behind the cold reality of what she'd just done. She'd exposed herself, put a target on her back. Again. The same mistake she'd made 5 years ago, except this time she didn't even have a career to lose. Just a job that barely paid rent. And she'd probably just lost that too. Thank you. Damien's voice cut through her spiral. She looked at him. You're welcome. Sit down. It wasn't a request. Evelyn pulled out a chair, the one Mercer had been sitting in, and sat. Her legs were grateful. Damien stayed standing. He picked up the contract, flipped through it with the kind of focus that suggested he was actually reading. After a moment, he set it down. You were right, he said. About everything. I had 6 lawyers review this contract. None of them caught it. They probably weren't looking for it. The language is technically legal, just designed to fail. Like a bridge built to collapse. Yes, he studied her, not the way men usually looked at her. Through her, past her, around her. Actually, at her. What's your name? Evelyn Hart. Morrison and Kale. The Murcroft Pharma case. I remember reading about that. He paused. They said you fabricated evidence. I didn't. I know. He said it simply. Vale and Emerson has a pattern. They're very good at making problems disappear by making people disappear. You're not the first person they've done this to. Something in Evelyn's chest loosened. Just slightly. Just enough to hurt. Why didn't you say something? She asked. If you knew, knowing and proving are different things, and I had no stake in your fight. He paused. Until tonight. So what happens now? Damien looked at the contract again, then at her. Now you tell me everything you know about how Vale and Emerson operates. Every dirty clause, every buried trap, every client they've done this to. Why? Because Caleb Mercer just made a mistake. He showed me his playbook, and I don't forgive easily. Evelyn should have been scared. Maybe she was. But underneath the fear was something else, something she hadn't felt in 5 years. Purpose. The distant memory of what it felt like to use her brain for something other than remembering drink orders. It's not just the contracts, she heard herself say. It's the whole network. Morrison and Cale was just the front. Vale and Emerson has relationships with at least a dozen major firms. They consult on structure, then they weaponize it. They've been doing it for years. You have proof? I had proof. They destroyed it when they destroyed me. But you remember every word. It was true. 5 years of trying to forget, and she could still recall every clause, every subsection, every poisoned word. Damien nodded slowly. Then we rebuild it, all of it. Every case, every client, every trap they've set. That could take months, maybe years. I'm patient. They'll come after me, after you. Let them. He said it like he meant it. I've been building empires for 20 years. I know how to protect what's mine. Evelyn's throat tightened. I'm not yours. No, Damien agreed, but you're the reason I still have an empire to build. That earns you something. What? A choice. He pulled a card from his pocket. Heavy stock, simple design, just a name and a number. You can walk out of here tonight, go back to your life, and I'll make sure Vale and Emerson never touches you again. You'll be safe, protected, invisible. He set the card on the table between them. Or you can help me burn them down. Evelyn looked at the card, at Damien, at her hands, which had finally stopped shaking. 5 years ago, she'd tried to fight corruption and lost everything. Learned that speaking up meant getting erased, that the powerful protected their own, and people like her were acceptable casualties in wars they didn't even know they were fighting. She'd learned to be invisible, to survive by not being seen. But tonight, she'd been seen. And for the first time in 5 years, she'd seen herself, not as a victim, not as a cautionary tale, but as someone who knew things that mattered. Someone who could still recognize a trap, could still name it, could still fight. The smart choice was to walk away, take the protection, stay invisible. But Evelyn was tired of being smart in ways that made her small. She picked up the card. Tell me what you need. Damien's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. Recognition, maybe, or respect. Everything, he said, starting with how deep this goes. So she told him. They talked for 3 hours. Evelyn dug into memories she'd been trying to bury, pulling out names, dates, cases. The pharmaceutical merger, the tech acquisition that had ended in mysterious bankruptcy, the real estate deal where a family-owned business got swallowed by a corporation that shouldn't have had the leverage. Damien listened, took notes, asked questions that suggested he wasn't just angry, he was calculating. Building something in his head that she couldn't see yet but could feel taking shape. By the time they finished, the restaurant had closed. The cleaning crew had come and gone. Manhattan stretched outside the windows like a circuit board of light and shadow. I need you to understand something, Damien said finally. Once we start this, there's no halfway. Vale and Emerson will know what we're doing. They'll respond, and they don't respond gently. I know. You'll need protection, security. You can't go back to your apartment. They'll know where you live by morning. The reality of that settled over her like cold water. So what do I do? You stay in my guest room tonight. Tomorrow, we move you somewhere secure. After that, he paused. After that, you help me dismantle everything Caleb Mercer has built. Evelyn should have been terrified, should have been questioning every choice that had led her to this moment. Instead, she felt something she'd almost forgotten existed, clarity. Okay, she said. Damien stood, extended a hand. Then we have a deal. She took it. His grip was firm, certain, the handshake of someone who'd made 1,000 deals and kept most of them. But as she followed him out of the private dining room, through the empty restaurant, into the Manhattan night where his car waited like a promise or a threat, Evelyn Hart realized something that made her pulse spike. She'd just traded invisibility for a war. And somewhere across the city, Caleb Mercer was realizing the same thing. The woman he'd destroyed 5 years ago had just stopped being destroyed. And the empire he'd built on burying people was about to learn what happened when the buried started digging back. The penthouse smelled like money that had forgotten it used to be new. Evelyn stood in the foyer while Damien Voss disabled an alarm system that probably cost more than her entire year's salary, and tried not to look like someone who'd just walked into a museum after closing time. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed Manhattan like a threat. All those lights, all those people, all those buildings where men like Caleb Mercer were probably already making phone calls about the waitress who'd ruined their evening. Guest room is down the hall, second door. Damien didn't look at her. He was already moving toward what looked like an office, pulling out his phone. There's clothes in the closet, probably too big, but better than sleeping in your uniform. Evelyn wanted to say thank you. Wanted to say something that acknowledged the surreal violence of the past 4 hours. Instead, she just nodded and walked down a hallway lined with art that she was pretty sure belonged in galleries. The guest room was bigger than her entire apartment. King bed, attached bathroom with marble that looked like it had been quarried from somewhere expensive and far away. A closet full of clothes that still had tags, designer labels she recognized from magazines she couldn't afford. She locked the door, stripped off her uniform, stood under a shower that had enough water pressure to hurt, and let herself shake. Because now, alone, without Damien's cold certainty or the adrenaline of confrontation, the reality crashed down like a building she'd forgotten was falling. She'd destroyed her safety, the careful invisibility she'd built over 5 years, gone in 3 minutes of speaking. Caleb Mercer knew her face now, knew her name, knew she was the loose thread that could unravel everything if someone pulled hard enough. And she'd just volunteered to be pulled. The water ran cold before she got out. She dried off with a towel so soft it felt wrong, pulled on clothes that were definitely too big, gray sweatpants, a black t-shirt that hung like a dress, and lay down on a bed that her body didn't believe was real. Sleep didn't come. Just the ceiling and the sound of the city outside, and the growing certainty that she'd made a mistake that felt exactly like the last mistake that had destroyed her life. Except this time, she'd made it with her eyes open. Somewhere past 3 in the morning, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Damien, probably, pacing. She wondered if he slept at all, or if men like him just existed in a state of controlled insomnia, always calculating, always 3 moves ahead. She must have dozed eventually because the next thing she knew, daylight was cutting through the windows like an accusation, and someone was knocking on her door. "Up," Damien's voice came through the wood. "We have work." Evelyn pulled herself upright. Her body ached in places that had nothing to do with the bed. Fear, probably. Or the delayed cost of adrenaline. She found him in the kitchen, all steel and granite and appliances that looked like they belonged in a spacecraft. He was already dressed, suit perfectly pressed, tie knotted with the precision of someone who'd never learned to do it casually. Coffee brewing, 2 mugs already on the counter. "Sleep?" he asked without looking up. Some liar. He poured coffee into both mugs, slid one across to her. "Doesn't matter. We're moving you in 2 hours. Evelyn wrapped her hands around the mug. The heat helped. "Moving me where?" "Safe house. Midtown. Building I own under a shell company that Mercer won't trace for at least a week. After that, we'll rotate you." "You have multiple safe houses." "I have 12. He said it the way other people said they had spare keys. Occupational necessity. She sipped the coffee. It was perfect, which somehow made everything worse. "What's the plan?" Damien pulled out a tablet, tapped it twice. A document appeared, dense, technical, the kind of contract she used to read for a living. "This is the Mercroft Pharma deal, the one you reported 5 years ago. I pulled it last night from public filings. Some of it's redacted, but enough is visible to see the structure." Evelyn set down her coffee, moved closer. The language on the screen was familiar in a way that made her stomach tight, like seeing handwriting from someone who'd tried to kill you. "Section 12, she said quietly. "The liability cascade. That's where it starts." Damien nodded. "Walk me through it." So she did. Spending the next hour dissecting language that had once cost her everything, explaining how the clauses folded into each other like origami designed to cut. Damien listened, asked questions that were too precise to be guesses, took notes in handwriting so small and controlled it looked like code. By the time they finished, Evelyn's coffee was cold and her head hurt from remembering things she'd tried to forget. How many deals like this has Vale and Emerson done? Damien asked. That I know of? 14. But those are just the ones that went public enough for me to see before they buried me. So there could be more. There's definitely more. Damien was quiet for a moment. Then he set down his pen and looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. I need to know if you're serious about this. I already said, you said it last night, after a confrontation, in a moment. I need to know if you mean it in daylight, when you've had time to think about what we're actually doing. Evelyn met his eyes. What are we actually doing? Going to war with one of the most connected legal consulting firms in New York. They have relationships with judges, prosecutors, law enforcement. They have money, they have leverage, and they have a perfect record of destroying anyone who threatens them. I know. I'm proof. You're proof they can destroy one person. We're talking about systematic dismantling, exposing every dirty deal, every buried victim, every client they've defrauded. That's not a lawsuit. That's scorched earth. Good. The word came out harder than she'd intended. Damien raised an eyebrow. They took everything from me, Evelyn said, and her voice was steady now, cold. My career, my reputation. 5 years of my life spent invisible because they decided I was inconvenient. So yes, I want scorched earth. Damien studied her, then nodded once. Okay, then here's what happens next. I have investigators, real ones, not the kind you hire through agencies. They're going to dig into every case Vale and Emerson has touched in the past 10 years. Find victims, find patterns, build a map. That'll take months. It'll take 3 weeks. I pay well. He paused. But I need you to do something harder. What? I need you to remember everything. Every case you reviewed at Morrison and Kale. Every conversation you overheard. Every document you saw before they erased you. Write it down. All of it. Evelyn felt something cold in her chest. That's hundreds of pages, maybe thousands. Then you'll be busy. No sympathy, just fact. We need a foundation, something concrete enough to build a legal strategy on. Your memory is the only evidence that survived. And if I miss something, if I get details wrong, then we verify. Cross-reference, confirm. But first, you have to remember. She wanted to say it was impossible, that 5 years had eroded the details, that trauma had a way of eating memory. But it wasn't true. She remembered. Every word, every clause, every moment of realizing that the people she'd trusted were the ones destroying her. She'd spent 5 years trying to forget, and all it had done was make the memories sharper. Okay, she said, where do I start? Damien handed her a laptop, new, still in plastic. Start at the beginning, Morrison and Kale, first case you ever reviewed. Work forward chronologically. Don't edit, don't second guess, just write. You're really not going to let me ease into this. Would you prefer I did? Evelyn looked at the laptop, at Damien's face, which showed about as much warmth as the marble countertops, at the coffee mug in her hands that belonged to a life she'd never lived and probably never would. No, she said finally, I wouldn't. Good. The car leaves in 90 minutes. Use the time. He walked out, already on his phone, already moving to the next problem. Evelyn sat at the kitchen counter with the laptop and a past she'd tried to bury and started typing. The first case had been a merger. Biotech company acquiring a research firm. She'd been assigned to review the asset transfer agreements. Routine work, supposed to be simple, except the language in Section 7 hadn't been simple at all. Her fingers found the keys, started translating memory into words. Morrison and Kale case file MK-2019-0847. Reviewed March 15, 2019. Asset transfer agreement between Biogenesis Solutions and Crestview Research Holdings. By the time Damien came back an hour later, she'd written 4,000 words and her hands were cramping. Time, he said. Evelyn saved the document, closed the laptop, followed him to an elevator that opened directly into the penthouse, because of course it did, and rode down 30 floors in silence. The car was waiting. Black sedan, windows tinted dark enough to be illegal. The driver didn't acknowledge her. Damien climbed in beside her, and they pulled into Manhattan traffic that moved like controlled chaos. "Where's the safe house?" she asked. "West 47th, above a restaurant I own. 3 exits, security system tied to a monitoring station I control. You'll be safe." "For how long?" "As long as it takes." The car turned onto a street that Evelyn vaguely recognized. She'd walked past it once or twice back when she used to walk places instead of taking the subway to avoid being seen. The restaurant looked upscale but not flashy, the kind of place that existed for people who already knew about it. They went through a side entrance, up a staircase that smelled like expensive food and old wood. The apartment was smaller than the penthouse. 2 bedrooms, living space, kitchen that looked barely used. "Security code is 4471, Damien said, showing her the panel by the door. "Changes weekly. I'll send you updates. Don't open the door for anyone you don't recognize. Don't leave unless I clear it first." "So I'm in prison." "You're in protection. There's a difference." "Feels the same from inside." Damien turned to look at her, and for the first time since the restaurant last night, something that might have been human showed in his expression. Not sympathy, he didn't seem built for that, but acknowledgement. "I know this isn't what you wanted," he said, "but Mercer is already moving, I guarantee it. He'll be looking for you, looking for leverage, trying to figure out how much damage you can actually do. And when he figures it out, he'll try to eliminate the problem, which is why you stay here, stay hidden, and keep writing. The faster we build the case, the faster you get your life back." Evelyn almost laughed. "I don't have a life to get back." "Then we'll build you a new one." He said it like it was simple, like lives were things you could construct with the right materials and enough money. "But first, we win." He left without saying goodbye. The door clicked shut, and Evelyn was alone in an apartment that belonged to a stranger, in a life that didn't feel real, with a laptop full of memories she'd tried to kill. She sat up at the kitchen table, opened the laptop, started typing again. Morrison and Kale case file MK-2019-0923. Reviewed April 3, 2019. Partnership dissolution agreement between Hartley and Moore and Crescent Capital Group. The words came easier now, like muscle memory, like her brain had been waiting 5 years for permission to do what it was built for. She wrote for 6 hours straight, only stopped when her vision started to blur and her back screamed from hunching over the keyboard. The document was up to 32 pages, 14 cases, hundreds of clauses, patterns starting to emerge like constellations in chaos. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. "How's the writing?" She stared at it, then realized it had to be Damien. He'd probably bought her a new phone, probably had it delivered while she was typing, probably had someone leave it on the counter without her noticing because she'd been too deep in the past to see the present. She found it next to the coffee maker. New iPhone, no case, just a screen, and a number she'd have to memorize. 32 pages, she typed back. "How's the war?" The response came fast. "Starting, keep writing, no punctuation, no pleasantries. Just commands that somehow didn't feel like orders." Evelyn made coffee, ate something from the fridge that might have been Thai food, went back to the laptop. Morrison and Kale case file MK-2019-1056. Reviewed May 22, 2019. Merger agreement between 3 days passed like that. Writing, sleeping in bursts, eating when she remembered. The apartment became a cell that she'd volunteered for, and the laptop became her only connection to a world that felt increasingly unreal. Damien texted twice a day, always the same question, "Status?" And she'd answer with page counts that kept growing. 60 pages, 90, 112. On the 4th day, he showed up in person. She heard the security code being punched in, then the door opening. Damien walked in carrying a briefcase and an expression that suggested bad news was about to get worse. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. Evelyn looked up from the laptop. Her eyes hurt. Her neck was a knot of pain. "What kind of problem?" "Mercer filed a defamation suit this morning. Against you." The words took a second to land. "What?" "He's claiming you made false statements about his business practices, damaged his reputation, interfered with contractual relationships." Damien set the briefcase on the table. "It's bullshit, but it's strategic bullshit." "How is that strategic?" Because now you're a defendant, which means discovery, which means depositions, which means he gets to ask you questions under oath about everything you know. Evelyn's stomach went cold. He's using the legal system to find out what we're doing. Exactly. Damien opened the briefcase, pulled out documents that looked official and threatening. He's also requesting immediate injunctive relief, wants a restraining order preventing you from making any further statements about him or his firm. Can he do that? He can try. We'll fight it, but the hearing is in 6 days. 6 days. Which means you need to finish that document, all of it, every case, every detail, because once we walk into that courtroom, everything changes. Evelyn looked at the laptop, at the 127 pages she'd already written, at the weight of memory that still needed to be excavated. I can't write 5 years of cases in 6 days. You can write the ones that matter, the ones with the same pattern, the ones that prove systematic fraud rather than isolated incidents. That's still... I know what it is. Damien's voice was flat. I'm not asking if it's possible. I'm telling you it's necessary. Something in Evelyn snapped. Not loud, not dramatic, just a clean break. You know what your problem is? She stood up. You think everything is a contract, everything is negotiable, everything has a price. That's not... I'm not your employee, I'm not your asset. I'm a person who's helping you because we have a common enemy. So stop giving me orders, like I'm on your payroll. Damien went very still, the kind of still that preceded violence or calculation, and with him it was hard to tell which. You're right, he said quietly. I apologize. The apology surprised her more than the argument. She sat back down. I'll write what I can, but I can't promise it'll be enough. It'll have to be, he paused. I'm also moving you tomorrow. Why? Because Mercer's investigators have been canvassing buildings in Midtown. They're looking for you, and they're good enough that I don't want to test how long this location stays secure. Evelyn felt the walls closing in. So where do I go? Brooklyn. Safe house number 7. Quieter neighborhood. Less foot traffic. Harder to surveil. And then what? I just keep moving every few days until this is over? If that's what it takes. No apology this time. Just fact. She wanted to scream. Wanted to throw the laptop through the window. Wanted to go back 5 days and choose differently. Keep her mouth shut, stay invisible, let Damien Voss sign his trap, and live her small, safe life. But she'd never been good at staying quiet. That was the problem. That was always the problem. Fine, she said. I'll be ready tomorrow. Damien nodded, picked up his briefcase, started toward the door. Wait, Evelyn said. He turned. Why are you doing this? The question came out before she could stop it. You could walk away, find other partners, other deals. Why go to war over a contract you didn't sign? Damien was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because Caleb Mercer tried to steal from me. And I don't forgive theft. That's it? Revenge? Revenge is expensive and stupid. This is about power. Mercer built his empire on the assumption that people won't fight back because fighting costs more than surrendering. I'm proving that assumption wrong. And I'm what? Your proof of concept? You're the weapon he didn't see coming. Damien's expression didn't change. He destroyed you because you were alone, unsupported, easy to bury, but you're not alone anymore, which means his playbook doesn't work. So I'm your attack dog. No. You're my partner. In this, at least. He paused at the door. Finish what you can. We'll make it work. Then he was gone, and Evelyn was alone again with a laptop and a past that kept demanding to be remembered. She typed until her fingers went numb, until the sun set and rose and set again, until the document hit 200 pages and the patterns were undeniable. Vale and Emerson hadn't just done this 14 times. They'd perfected it. A machine designed to transfer wealth and power from people who didn't see it coming to people who designed the trap. And she was going to dismantle it, one clause at a time. The move to Brooklyn happened at 4 a.m. Different car, different driver. Damien wasn't there, just a security team that moved her like cargo, efficient and silent. The new safe house was above a bodega, smaller, louder. The street outside had actual people on it instead of just money and glass. Evelyn sat up at a different kitchen table, opened the laptop, kept writing. Morrison and Kale case file MK-2020-0234. Reviewed January 11th, 2020. Licensing agreement between... 2 days before the hearing, Damien came back. This time he brought someone with him. "This is Nadia Cole," he said, gesturing to a woman in her 50s with gray hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen through every lie ever told. "She's going to be your attorney." Nadia held out a hand. Evelyn shook it. The grip was firm, professional, terrifying. "I've reviewed your document," Nadia said without preamble. "It's impressive, also completely inadmissible." "Excuse me?" "Hearsay. Unverified memory. No supporting documentation. Any judge throws this out in 30 seconds. She sat down at the table. "But it gives me a roadmap. Now we turn it into evidence." "How?" "By finding the people these contracts hurt, getting them to talk, on record, with documentation." Nadia pulled out her own laptop. "Damien's investigators have located 6 of the 14 cases you documented. We need statements from the victims, contracts if they still have them, anything that proves your memory is accurate." Evelyn's head was spinning. "That'll take 48 hours, maybe less." Nadia started typing. "I'm very good at my job." She wasn't lying. Over the next 2 days, Evelyn watched Nadia operate like a legal chainsaw. Phone calls that lasted 3 minutes and produced signed statements. Emails that came back with scanned contracts. A network of connections that Evelyn couldn't even map. By the morning of the hearing, they had documentation for 9 cases. Victim testimony for 6. Enough to build an argument that wasn't just memory, but material fact. "It's not perfect," Nadia said as they drove to the courthouse in yet another anonymous car. "But it's enough to survive dismissal. Maybe enough to counterclaim." "Counterclaim for what?" "Malicious prosecution, abuse of process, fraud. Take your pick." She smiled, and it wasn't comforting. Mercer opened a door. "Let's see how he likes what walks through." The courthouse was downtown, old stone, high ceilings, the kind of building designed to make you feel small. Damien was already there, waiting in a hallway that echoed with footsteps and whispered arguments. He looked like he always did, controlled, focused, dangerous. "Ready?" he asked. Evelyn wanted to say no, wanted to run, wanted to disappear back into the safety of invisibility. Instead, she said, "Yes." They walked into the courtroom. Evelyn's first time in one since her own destruction 5 years ago, when Morrison and Kale's lawyers had buried her under procedure and perjury. Caleb Mercer was already seated at the plaintiff's table. He looked exactly the same, expensive suit, perfect hair, smile that didn't reach anywhere important. When he saw her, the smile widened, and Evelyn realized with cold certainty he'd been waiting for this, wanted her here, wanted her on record, under oath, vulnerable. This wasn't a lawsuit, it was a trap, and she just walked into it with her eyes open. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The proceeding began. And Evelyn Hart, who'd spent 5 years learning to be invisible, sat in full view of the man who'd destroyed her life and prepared to fight back with nothing but memory and a billionaire's resources. The war had started. Now came the part where someone had to. The judge was a woman in her early 60s named Patricia Hartwell, with reading glasses that hung on a chain and an expression that suggested she'd seen every variety of legal bullshit and wasn't impressed by any of it. She looked at the docket, then at both tables, then sighed like someone who'd already spent too many years in this room. "Mercer versus Hart," she said, "defamation and injunctive relief. Mr. Mercer, you're the plaintiff. Let's hear it." Caleb Mercer's attorney stood, a man named Douglas Feinberg, who looked like he'd been grown in a lab specifically to intimidate juries. Tall, silver hair, voice like aged bourbon. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of malicious defamation. The defendant, Ms. Hart, made demonstrably false statements about my client's business practices, damaging his professional reputation and interfering with active contractual negotiations." Judge Hartwell gestured impatiently. "Get to the specifics." 5 nights ago, Ms. Hart publicly accused Mr. Mercer of operating a fraudulent enterprise. She claimed, without evidence, that contracts prepared by Vail and Emerson Advisory contain intentionally deceptive language designed to harm clients. These statements were made in front of witnesses, including Mr. Damien Voss, who subsequently terminated a multi-billion-dollar agreement based solely on Ms. Hart's unfounded accusations. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. Nadia's hand touched her arm briefly. A warning. Stay calm, stay quiet. Feinberg continued, warming up now. Ms. Hart has a documented history of making false accusations. 5 years ago, she was terminated from Morrison and Kale for fabricating evidence related to corporate contracts. Now she's attempting the same tactic, targeting my client in what appears to be a vendetta motivated by her own professional failures. Your Honor, Nadia started to rise. Not yet, Ms. Cole. Judge Hartwell kept her eyes on Feinberg. Continue. We're seeking an immediate injunction preventing Ms. Hart from making any further statements, public or private, regarding Mr. Mercer or Vale and Emerson. Additionally, we're pursuing damages for reputational harm and tortious interference with contractual relations. Amount? $15 million. The number landed like a brick through glass. Evelyn felt the air leave her lungs. 15 million. She didn't have 1,500. Judge Hartwell wrote something down. Miss Cole, response. Nadia stood, and when she spoke, her voice had the kind of calm that came from absolute confidence or complete insanity. Your Honor, everything Mr. Feinberg just said is a lie designed to cover up systematic corporate fraud. Feinberg shot to his feet. Your Honor, that's... Sit down, Mr. Feinberg. You had your turn. Judge Hartwell looked at Nadia. That's a serious accusation, Counselor. It's a serious crime. Nadia pulled out a folder. Ms. Hart didn't fabricate anything. She identified a pattern of contractual fraud that Vale and Emerson has been perpetrating for at least 6 years. We have documentation, victim testimony, pattern evidence showing systematic exploitation. Your Honor, this is a transparent attempt to... I said sit down. Judge Hartwell's voice didn't rise, but Feinberg sat like he'd been shot. She turned back to Nadia. You're claiming the plaintiff committed fraud? Multiple counts across multiple jurisdictions. We're prepared to file a countersuit for malicious prosecution, abuse of process, and RICO violations. The courtroom went very quiet. RICO, Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, the kind of charge that turned civil cases into federal investigations. Caleb Mercer's face didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. A flicker. Recognition that this wasn't going according to plan. Judge Hartwell looked at the folder in Nadia's hands. You have evidence of RICO violations? We have evidence of a pattern of fraud spanning 6 years, 14 documented cases, and an estimated $200 million in damages to victims. That meets the threshold for racketeering activity. Feinberg found his voice. Your Honor, these are desperate allegations with no foundation. Then you won't mind discovery. Nadia smiled. It was terrifying. We'd like to depose Mr. Mercer. Review Vale and Emerson's case files. Examine their contract templates. If there's nothing to hide, discovery should be quick. Judge Hartwell removed her glasses, cleaned them slowly, put them back on. This hearing was supposed to be about whether Ms. Hart defamed Mr. Mercer. Now you're telling me it's about organized crime? I'm telling you that Mr. Mercer filed this lawsuit to silence a witness to his fraud. That's malicious prosecution. It's also obstruction. Your Honor, Feinberg tried again. Mr. Feinberg, I'm going to give you some free advice. Judge Hartwell leaned forward. If Ms. Cole has even a fraction of what she claims, your client is in serious trouble. So I suggest you stop interrupting and start thinking about whether you want your name attached to this case when the federal prosecutors show up. Feinberg went pale. Actually, pale. Evelyn watched the color drain from his face like water from a cracked glass. Judge Hartwell looked at both attorneys. Here's what's going to happen. I'm denying the injunction. Ms. Hart can say whatever she wants about Mr. Mercer until someone proves she's lying. I'm also ordering expedited discovery. Both sides. Full disclosure. You have 3 weeks. Your Honor. Feinberg tried one last time. 3 weeks, Counselor. And if I find out anyone has destroyed evidence, I'm referring this to the FBI myself. Are we clear? Silence. The kind that felt like gravity reversing. Good. Next case. The gavel came down. Evelyn sat frozen while the courtroom moved around her, people standing, papers rustling, lawyers whispering urgently into phones. Nadia leaned close. Breathe. Evelyn realized she'd been holding her breath. let it out slowly. Did we just win? We survived. Different thing. Nadia started packing her briefcase. Now comes the hard part. Across the aisle, Caleb Mercer was standing. He looked at Evelyn, really looked, the way you'd look at something you were calculating how to destroy, then walked out of the courtroom with Feinberg trailing behind like a nervous dog. Damien appeared at Evelyn's shoulder. Outside. Now. They left through a side exit, down a hallway that smelled like old carpets and crushed dreams, out into daylight that felt wrong after the fluorescent hostility of the courtroom. The car was waiting. They climbed in, doors shut. The world outside became muted glass and moving shapes. That was reckless, Damien said to Nadia. That was necessary. Nadia didn't look apologetic. Mercer was trying to bury her with procedure. I made it too expensive to continue. You also just declared war. RICO charges. That brings federal attention. Good. Let them investigate. We have evidence. We have fragments, memory, partial documentation. That's not the same as a prosecutable case. Evelyn listened to them argue, feeling disconnected from her own body. Everything had happened too fast. One moment she was a defendant facing $15 million in damages. The next she was a witness in a federal fraud investigation. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt like someone had painted a target on her back in fluorescent paint. Stop, she said. They both looked at her. Just stop. Both of you. Evelyn pressed her palms against her eyes. What happens now? Now we prepare for discovery, Nadia said. They're going to demand your documentation, everything you wrote, every case you remember. We need it bulletproof. And if it's not, then we lose, and Mercer buries us. The car pulled up to a building Evelyn didn't recognize. Damien's office, probably. They went inside, up an elevator that moved too smoothly, into a space that was all glass and steel and the kind of minimalism that cost a fortune. Damien's office overlooked the city like a threat assessment, floor-to-ceiling windows, conference table that could seat 12, screens on every wall showing data that Evelyn couldn't parse. Sit, Damien said. Evelyn sat. Nadia did too. Damien remained standing, moving to the windows, looking out at Manhattan like he was planning how to reorganize it. We have 3 weeks, he said. Mercer's going to spend that time doing 2 things, destroying evidence and discrediting Evelyn. He can't destroy evidence if we already have copies, Nadia said. He doesn't need to destroy all of it, just enough to create reasonable doubt. Make it look like we're building a narrative instead of documenting facts. So what do? Damien turned from the window. We go faster. Hit him before he can regroup. I have investigators on 6 of the cases Evelyn documented. We need the other 8. Nadia checked her tablet. That's a lot of ground to cover in 3 weeks. Then we work fast. Evelyn's head was pounding. What do you need from me? More detail. You wrote 200 pages. I need 400. Every conversation you remember, every person who was in the room, every piece of evidence you saw before Morrison and Cale erased you. I can't remember everything. You can remember enough. Damien's voice was flat. Because if you can't, we lose. And when we lose, Mercer doesn't just win this case. He destroys you so completely that you'll wish you'd stayed invisible. The words hit like a fist. Evelyn stood up. I'm not your employee. Stop talking to me like I'm a tool you're using. You are a tool I'm using. We both are. This isn't friendship. It's warfare. And in war, you use whatever weapons work. Then maybe I should find a different war. There is no different war. Mercer will hunt you whether you fight or run. At least this way, you're armed. Evelyn wanted to scream, wanted to throw something through the pristine windows, wanted to go back 5 days and make different choices. But Damien was right. There was no going back. Only forward into whatever nightmare was waiting. Fine, she said. I'll write more. But I need something from you. What? The truth. Why are you really doing this? And don't give me the power speech. Nobody burns this much capital over a contract they didn't sign. Damien was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Caleb Mercer killed my brother. The room went silent. Even Nadia looked surprised. Not directly, Damien continued, not with his hands. But 15 years ago, my brother Marcus had a business. Import-export. Legitimate. He partnered with a firm that Mercer consulted for. Within 2 years, Marcus lost everything. The contracts Mercer designed guaranteed it. What happened to him? Evelyn asked quietly. He shot himself, left a note that said he couldn't live with the failure. Damien's voice was completely flat. I found the contract 6 months later. Saw what had been done. Saw the same clauses you identified, but I couldn't prove it. Couldn't fight it. So I built an empire instead. And waited. For what? For Mercer to make a mistake. For someone to see what I saw. For leverage. He looked at Evelyn. Then you walked into my dinner and gave me everything I needed. Evelyn felt cold. So I'm your revenge. You're my justice. There's a difference. Not from where I'm sitting. Damien moved closer. You want the truth? Here it is. I'm using you. You're using me. We both want Mercer destroyed. The reasons don't matter, only the outcome. The reasons always matter. Not in court. Not when we're 3 weeks from discovery that could end this. You can hate me later. Right now, I need you functional. Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to tell him to go to hell, but she looked at his face, at the absolute absence of anything except cold calculation, and realized something terrible. She was exactly the same. She didn't care about justice. She cared about destroying the man who destroyed her. Everything else, the victims, the evidence, even Damien's dead brother, was just ammunition. They were both monsters. They'd just found each other. Okay, she said. All right. She wrote for 2 weeks straight, barely slept, ate when Nadia forced food in front of her. The document grew to 387 pages, then 421, then 468. Damien's investigators found documentation for 3 more cases, victim testimony for 2. The pattern was undeniable now. Systematic fraud across years, across industries, across victims who'd never connected their destruction to a common source. Vale and Emerson had been operating like a cancer, invisible until it metastasized, and now they were cutting it out. On day 13, Nadia came to the safe house, a new one in Queens, above a laundromat that ran 24 hours, with news that made Evelyn's stomach drop. We have a problem, Nadia said. Evelyn looked up from the laptop. Her eyes felt like sandpaper. What kind? One of our witnesses recanted. James Holloway, the Murcroft Pharma case. He signed a statement yesterday saying his original testimony was coerced. That's bullshit. I never even spoke to him. Your investigator did. I know. But Mercer's lawyers are claiming we pressured him, threatened him. Now he's saying everything he told us was fabricated. Evelyn felt the floor shift. Can they do that? They just did, and it gets worse. 2 other witnesses have gone silent, won't return calls, won't respond to subpoenas. Mercer got to them. Probably, or scared them enough that they won't testify. Nadia sat down heavily. We're losing ground, fast. What about the contracts, the documentation? Still good, but without victim testimony, the contracts are just language. We need people who were hurt to prove the harm. Evelyn's hands were shaking. So what do we do? Find more witnesses, faster. Damien's investigators are working on it, but we're running out of time. The laptop screen blurred. Evelyn blinked, tried to focus. How much time? Discovery deadline is in 8 days. If we don't have a solid case by then, Judge Hartwell will dismiss, and Mercer will countersue for malicious prosecution. This time, he'll win. Jesus. Yeah. Nadia stood. Keep writing. I'll keep hunting. But Evelyn, if this falls apart, you need to be ready. Ready for what? To disappear. Really disappear. Because Mercer won't stop until you're erased. After Nadia left, Evelyn sat in the quiet apartment with the laptop and the crushing weight of failure pressing down like atmosphere. She'd been so sure, so certain that memory and documentation and Damien's resources would be enough. But Mercer was better at this than she was, had more practice, more connections, more ways to make problems disappear. She was losing. Her phone buzzed. A text from Damien. Office. Now. The car came 20 minutes later. Drove her through Queens into Manhattan, up to the glass tower where Damien's empire lived. He was waiting in the conference room with someone Evelyn didn't recognize, a man in his 40s, expensive suit, face like a closed door. This is Agent Marcus Reeves, Damien said. FBI, he wants to talk to you. Evelyn's heart stopped. About what? Reeves opened a folder. About Vale and Emerson Advisory. And your relationship with Damien Voss. The room tilted. My relationship? You've been living in properties owned by Mr. Voss for 2 weeks. He's funded your legal defense, provided investigators. By any reasonable definition, you're in his employ. I'm helping him expose fraud, or you're helping him commit it. Reeves pulled out documents, set them on the table. We've been investigating Mr. Voss for 3 years. Money laundering, racketeering, ties to organizations that operate outside legal boundaries. Evelyn looked at Damien. His face showed nothing. I don't understand, she said. It's simple. Reeves leaned forward. Damien Voss is a criminal. He's using you to attack a competitor. And when this is over, you'll be the one facing charges while he walks away clean. That's not... Evelyn's voice cracked. That's not what's happening, isn't it? Think about it. He finds you at exactly the right moment, offers protection, resources, revenge against the man who destroyed you. Doesn't that seem convenient? He was the target. I warned him about the contract. Did you? Or did he know about Mercer's methods already and need someone to front the accusation? Someone expendable, someone with a grudge and nothing to lose. The words landed like bullets. Evelyn turned to Damien. Tell him that's not what happened. Damien said nothing. Mr. Voss? Reeves smiled. You want to clarify? I want my attorney present before I say anything. That's your right. But Ms. Hart doesn't have that luxury. She's already on record, already made accusations. If those accusations are part of a criminal conspiracy, she's liable. Evelyn felt like she was drowning. I didn't conspire with anyone. I told the truth. Your truth. Or the truth Mr. Voss needed you to tell. Reeves stood. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to come with me, answer questions, provide documentation, and if you cooperate, maybe we can work something out. And if I don't, then you're an accessory to fraud, conspiracy, possibly obstruction. You're looking at 20 years. The number echoed in the silence. 20 years. For telling the truth. For trying to fight back. Evelyn looked at Damien, desperate for him to say something. Anything. To tell Reeves he was wrong. To defend her. But Damien just stood there, silent as stone, and Evelyn realized with cold horror that she'd been played. Everything. The rescue, the protection, the resources had been bait, and she'd swallowed it completely. You're using me, she said to Damien. Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. You were always using me. Yes, Damien said quietly. The admission hit worse than a lie would have. Why? Because Mercer destroyed my brother, and I needed someone who'd already been destroyed to fight him. Someone who had nothing left to lose. He paused. Someone expendable. Evelyn felt something break inside her chest. Not her heart. Hearts were for people who still believed in things. This was colder, structural. The collapse of a foundation she'd thought was solid. You bastard, she whispered. I know. Damien's face showed nothing. But it worked. Mercer's exposed, vulnerable. The investigation started. That was always the goal. And me? What happens to me? That depends on your choices. Reeves put a hand on Evelyn's arm. Ms. Hart, let's go. She pulled away. Don't touch me. You can walk or I can arrest you. Your choice. Evelyn looked around the conference room, at the windows showing Manhattan, at Damien's impassive face, at the folder full of accusations that proved she'd been a fool. She'd traded invisibility for war and lost both. I'll walk, she said. Reeves nodded, picked up his folder, started toward the door. Evelyn followed, her legs moving automatically while her brain tried to process the magnitude of her mistake. At the door she stopped, looked back at Damien one last time. Was any of it real? She asked. The investigation? The evidence? The victims? All of it, Damien said. That's the thing about good manipulation. The truth works better than lies. So you destroyed me to destroy Mercer. I gave you a weapon and pointed you at a target. What you did with it was your choice. Evelyn wanted to scream, wanted to throw something, wanted to rewind time to 5 days ago when she'd still been nobody, serving wine to people who didn't see her. But time only moved forward, into interrogation rooms and federal charges, and a future that looked exactly like her past. Erased, buried, forgotten. Goodbye, Damien, she said. Goodbye, Evelyn. She walked out, into the hallway, into the elevator, into a car that wasn't Damien's, with a man who thought she was a criminal, heading toward a building where she'd have to explain how she'd ended up here. And she realized with crushing clarity that she had no good answer, because the truth was simple and terrible. She'd wanted revenge so badly that she'd let herself be weaponized, let herself believe that fighting back meant winning, that exposure meant justice. But there was no justice, just powerful people using less powerful people until they broke. She'd been broken before. Now she was broken again. Different pieces. Same result. The FBI building was gray concrete and fluorescent lights. Interrogation rooms smelled like industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Reeves sat across from her with a recorder and questions that felt designed to trap. "Let's start simple," he said. "How did you meet Damien Voss?" Evelyn told the truth. All of it, the restaurant, the contract, the warning, the offer. Reeves listened without expression. "And you didn't think it was strange that he immediately believed you? I thought he was smart enough to recognize a trap. Or he'd already planned the trap and needed you to spring it." Reeves made a note. "Did Mr. Voss ever discuss his prior investigations, his business practices, anything that suggested illegal activity?" "No." "Did he ask you to fabricate evidence?" "No. Everything I wrote was memory, documented cases. Cases you can't fully prove without victim testimony, and those victims keep disappearing." Reeves leaned forward. "Doesn't that suggest the evidence was manufactured?" "It suggests Mercer's intimidating witnesses. That's not the same thing. Or it suggests there are no real victims, just a narrative you and Voss constructed to damage a competitor." Evelyn's hands clenched under the table. "That's not what happened." "Then explain the timeline. You go from Waitress to star witness in 48 hours. Voss provides unlimited resources. No questions asked. That's not normal." "Nothing about this is normal." "Exactly my point. The questions continued for 3 hours, circling, probing, looking for cracks. Evelyn answered truthfully because lying would only make it worse. But the truth sounded thin even to her ears. She'd been used, manipulated, turned into a weapon without realizing it. And now the weapon was going to prison, while the person who'd wielded it walked free. Finally, Reeves stopped the recorder. "Here's where we are. I believe you were manipulated. I believe Voss used you. But belief isn't evidence. And right now, the evidence says you colluded with a known criminal to commit fraud. So what happens? That depends on you. If you cooperate, fully cooperate, we can probably avoid charges. You testify against Voss, provide documentation, help us build a case against his actual crimes. And Mercer, Vale, and Emerson, the fraud I actually reported? Different investigation, different timeline. Might happen, might not." Evelyn felt something cold settle in her chest. "So I trade one monster for another. You trade testimony for freedom. That's the deal. And if I refuse, then you're an accomplice. 20 years, federal prison, no parole." The choice wasn't really a choice, but Evelyn looked at Reeves's face, confident, certain, already counting this as a win, and felt something shift inside her. She'd spent 5 years being afraid, being careful, being invisible. Then she'd spent 2 weeks fighting back. And yes, she'd been used, manipulated, turned into a weapon in someone else's war. But she'd also remembered what it felt like to fight, to use her brain for something that mattered, to name corruption instead of serving wine around it. Damien had used her, but she'd used him too, used his resources, his protection, his war. And the war wasn't over. "I need to think about it," she said. Reeves frowned. "There's not much to think about." "Then you won't mind giving me time." 24 hours. After that, I file charges." Evelyn stood. "Fine. 24 hours. Where are you going?" "Somewhere I can think without you staring at me." Reeves looked like he wanted to argue. Then he nodded. "Don't leave the city. And Miss Hart, think carefully. This is your last chance to do the right thing." She walked out, into Manhattan, into crowds that didn't see her, into a life that felt like it was collapsing for the second time. Her phone was in her pocket. She pulled it out, stared at the screen. One number, the only one that mattered. She dialed. Damien answered on the second ring. "Evelyn, I'm not testifying against you." Silence. Then, Why not? Because Reeves is wrong. You didn't manipulate me. You gave me a choice, and I chose to fight. That's not how the FBI will see it. I don't care how they see it. Evelyn's voice was steady now, cold. You used me. Fine. I used you too. We both wanted Mercer destroyed. That hasn't changed. The investigation is a distraction. Mercer's play. He got to the FBI, turned them against you, against me. Classic misdirection. Damien was quiet for a moment. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. Don't patronize me. Just tell me, is there a way to win this? Depends on your definition of winning. Mercer in prison. Vale and Emerson destroyed. Us not in handcuffs. That's ambitious. That's the only outcome I'll accept. Another pause. Then Damien said something that sounded almost like respect. Where are you? 42nd Street, near the library. Stay there. I'm sending a car. Why? Because if you're not testifying against me, we need a new strategy, and we need it in the next 23 hours. What kind of strategy? The kind that burns everything down. Evelyn should have been scared, should have run, should have taken Reeves's deal and disappeared into witness protection. But she'd tried disappearing once. It hadn't saved her, so maybe it was time to stop hiding. Send the car, she said, and waited for her last chance at something that might have been justice, or might have been revenge, or might have just been the... The car arrived in 4 minutes. Black sedan, tinted windows, driver who didn't make eye contact. Evelyn climbed in and the door shut like a vault closing. Manhattan blurred past, all glass and steel, and people who had no idea that somewhere in this city, 2 wars were converging into something that would leave bodies. Damien's office felt different this time. Colder. Or maybe that was just her. She walked in and found him standing at the windows with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in a language she didn't recognize. Russian, maybe. He saw her, held up one finger, finished the conversation in 3 clipped sentences. You came, he said, pocketing the phone. I said I would. People say a lot of things when they're afraid. Following through is different. Evelyn crossed her arms. I'm here. So either tell me the plan, or I'm walking back to the FBI and taking Reeves's deal. Damien studied her for a moment. Then he nodded toward the conference table. Sit. She sat. He pulled out a laptop, opened it, turned the screen toward her. Security footage. Multiple angles. The courthouse from this morning. No, not this morning. Yesterday. 2 days ago. What am I looking at? She asked. Watch. The footage showed Caleb Mercer leaving the courthouse after the hearing. He walked to a car. Got in. The car pulled away. Normal. Unremarkable. Except the next angle showed the car 3 blocks later, pulling into an underground garage. Mercer got out. Met someone in the shadows. The camera quality was grainy, but good enough to see the exchange. Envelope passing hands, brief conversation, then both men disappearing in different directions. Who's he meeting? Evelyn asked. Agent Marcus Reeves? The name landed like a punch. What? Your FBI friend. He's been on Mercer's payroll for 6 months. Maybe longer. Damien tapped the keyboard. Another video appeared. Same garage, different day, same 2 men. I've had Mercer under surveillance since the restaurant. Tracked his movements, his calls, his money. That's how I knew about the lawsuit before he filed it. Evelyn felt sick. Reeves is dirty. Reeves is leveraged. Mercer has something on him. Probably financial. Maybe personal. Doesn't matter. What matters is that the FBI investigation into me isn't real. It's theater designed to discredit our case before discovery. So the questions, the accusations, all scripted. Mercer fed him the narrative, Reeves performed it, and you were supposed to crack under pressure and either testify against me or run. Either way, you're neutralized. Evelyn's hands were shaking. Why didn't you tell me this 3 hours ago, before I sat in that interrogation room? Because I needed to see what you'd do. If you'd break. If you'd sell me out to save yourself. You were testing me. Yes. She wanted to hit him, wanted to scream, wanted to walk out and never look back. But the cold truth was that she'd have done the same thing in his position. Trust was a luxury neither of them could afford. So what now? She asked through clenched teeth. Now we use it. Reeves is corrupt. That makes everything he touched suspect, including his investigation into me. Damien pulled up another file. I've got documentation, financial transfers, communication logs, enough to prove he's been compromised. You take that to the FBI, and they bury it. Reeves isn't working alone. He's got cover, probably his supervisor, maybe higher. Damien closed the laptop. We can't fight this through official channels. Mercer owns too many pieces of the system. Then what do? We go around it. He stood, walked to the windows. Mercer's power comes from invisibility. He operates in shadows, destroys people quietly, makes problems disappear before anyone notices. So we drag him into the light, make it impossible to hide. How? Damien turned. His eyes had that look again, the one that suggested violence was just math waiting for coordinates. We give the media everything, every contract, every victim, every piece of evidence we've built. Make it public, make it loud, make it so big that even Mercer's connections can't bury it. Evelyn felt her pulse spike. That's suicide. We go public, we lose any chance of a clean legal win. No trial, no controlled narrative, just chaos. Chaos is the point. In chaos, Mercer can't control the outcome, can't manipulate judges or intimidate witnesses. The story takes on a life of its own. And we lose credibility. Become conspiracy theorists throwing accusations. The media will tear us apart. Let them. As long as they tear Mercer apart harder. Damien moved closer. You want to win in court? We can't. Not with Reeves corrupting the investigation. Not with Mercer controlling the witnesses. But we can win in public opinion. Destroy his reputation so completely that no client ever trusts him again. That's not justice. No, but it's vengeance, and right now that's all we have. Evelyn looked at him, at the absolute absence of doubt in his face, at the man who'd orchestrated her destruction just to see if she'd survive it. She should hate him. Maybe she did. But he was also the only person in 5 years who'd given her the chance to fight back. When? She asked. Tonight. I have contacts at 3 major outlets. Investigative journalists who've been trying to crack Vail and Emerson for years. We give them the documentation, walk them through the cases. By morning, the story breaks everywhere. And Mercer's response will be immediate and violent. He'll sue, threaten, try to discredit us. But by then it won't matter. The damage is done. What about Reeves? The FBI. Once the story breaks, Reeves becomes a liability. The Bureau will cut him loose to protect itself. Internal Affairs will investigate. He'll be too busy saving his own career to come after us. Evelyn stood. Her legs felt unsteady, but her mind was clear. You've been planning this the whole time, since the restaurant. Maybe before. Yes. So the lawsuit, the discovery, all of it was just buying time. All of it was creating pressure, making Mercer desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, like using a corrupt FBI agent. Damien picked up his phone. I'm calling the journalists. You have 1 hour to decide if you're in. I'm in. He paused. You're sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. Your name is public. Your face is public. You'll never be invisible again. Good. I'm done being invisible. Damien made the calls. 3 conversations, each under 5 minutes. Professional, controlled. Setting coordinates for detonations. By 8 p.m., they were in a conference room with 2 investigative reporters and a television producer who looked like she'd been waiting her entire career for a story this big. Rachel Chen from The Times, Michael Torres from The Post, Diana Volkov from a cable news network that Evelyn vaguely recognized. Walk us through it, Rachel said, notebook open, pen ready. So Evelyn did, starting with Morrison and Kale. The Murcroft Pharma case, the destruction of her career, then forward through every documented case, every victim, every piece of the machine that Vail and Emerson had built. She talked for 90 minutes straight. The journalists took notes, asked questions, cross-referenced details. Michael Torres kept shaking his head like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. This is enormous, he said finally. If even half of this is verifiable. It's all verifiable, Damien interrupted. He pushed a flash drive across the table. Contracts, financial records, victim statements, communications, everything. Diana Volkov picked up the drive like it might explode. You're giving us this? All of it? On the record. No anonymous sources. We're putting our names on this. That's brave, Rachel said. Also possibly insane. Probably both, Evelyn agreed. Mercer will come after you. Hard. Let him. At least people will be watching. The journalists looked at each other. Some unspoken communication passed between them, the kind that came from years of working stories that powerful people wanted buried. We'll need 24 hours to verify, Rachel said. Cross-check sources. Get comments from Vale and Emerson. You have 12, Damien said. That's not enough time. It's all the time we have. Mercer knows we're moving. He'll be preparing countermeasures. We need to hit first. Michael leaned back in his chair. You know what you're asking? We put this out half verified. We lose credibility. Our editors will kill us. Your editors will give you front page when they see what's on that drive. Diana opened her laptop, plugged in the drive, started scrolling through files. Her expression changed from skepticism to shock to something that looked like hunger. Jesus, this is RICO territory. That's what we told the judge, Evelyn said. And the FBI investigation into Voss? How does that play? Corrupt agent working for Mercer. We have proof. Damien pulled out another drive. Everything's here. You'll want to verify independently. Rachel took it. If this checks out, if even a fraction of this checks out, this story runs everywhere. National, maybe international. That's the idea. And you're both prepared for what comes after? The lawsuits, the scrutiny? Mercer will dig into every aspect of your lives. Evelyn met Rachel's eyes. He already destroyed my life once. There's nothing left to dig up. What about you? Diana asked Damien. Your business, your reputation. You're putting everything on the line. I built my empire to have leverage. This is what leverage looks like when you use it. The journalists spent another hour grilling them, testing claims, looking for holes. By 10 p.m., they were packing up their equipment with expressions that suggested they'd just been handed a bomb and asked to carry it carefully. We'll be in touch, Rachel said. Probably around 4 a.m. when we've verified enough to run. We'll be awake, Damien said. They left. The conference room felt suddenly empty. Evelyn sat in the silence while Damien made more calls, lawyers probably, preparing for the tsunami. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. You have 6 hours to reconsider. After that, it's war. She showed it to Damien. He glanced at it without expression. Mercer, he said. How did he get this number? Same way he gets everything. Money, connections, fear. Damien set down his phone. He's trying to shake you. Last-ditch intimidation. It's not working. Good, because in about 5 hours, he's going to do worse than text. Evelyn's stomach tightened. What do you mean? I mean, Mercer doesn't lose quietly. When the story breaks, he'll respond. Not legally, that takes too long. He'll respond personally, try to discredit us before the narrative solidifies. How? By attacking the weakest point, which is you. The words landed like ice. What are you saying? I'm saying you need protection. Real protection. Not just a safe house. Security. People who can keep you alive if this gets physical. You think he'd... I think Mercer has spent 15 years building an empire on making problems disappear, and you're about to become his biggest problem. Damien pulled out his phone, made a call. I'm sending a team. They'll stay with you until this is over. I don't need... This isn't negotiable. If you want to fight, you fight with backup. The team arrived 20 minutes later. 3 people, 2 men, 1 woman, all wearing tactical clothing that looked expensive and purposeful. The woman was in her 30s, short dark hair, eyes that scanned the room like she was calculating sight lines. Evelyn Hart? She asked. Yes. I'm Maya. This is Cole and Jordan. We'll be your security detail until further notice. I don't need security. Oh, poco. You do now. Maya gestured to the door. We're moving you to a secure location. Different borough. No connection to Mr. Voss. Mercer won't be able to trace it. Evelyn looked at Damien. I thought we were done hiding. We're done hiding the story. You're still vulnerable, and I need you alive when this hits the fan. She wanted to argue, wanted to refuse. But the text from Mercer still burned on her phone screen, and the cold truth was that he'd killed before. Maybe not directly, maybe not with his own hands, but Damien's brother was dead because of a contract, and contracts were just words until someone enforced them with violence. Fine, she said. Where are we going? Brooklyn, industrial area. Building I own through a trust Mercer won't trace for at least a week. By then, this will be over. One way or another, Maya added. Not reassuring, just honest. They left through a service exit. Different car, armored. Evelyn could tell by the way it moved. Heavy, deliberate, built to take hits. Cole drove. Jordan rode shotgun. Maya sat in back with Evelyn, one hand resting casually near a sidearm that probably wasn't registered anywhere official. Brooklyn passed outside the windows. Neighborhoods she didn't recognize. Streets that got darker and quieter until they pulled into an industrial complex that looked abandoned. Here, Cole said. The building was 4 stories of brick and broken windows, but inside it had been converted. Secure doors, surveillance cameras, lights that worked. The top floor was a single apartment with reinforced walls and enough supplies to survive a siege. Stay inside, Maya said. Don't go near windows. Don't make calls on your personal phone. We'll rotate shifts. You need something, you ask us. How long? Until the story breaks. After that, Mercer's options narrow. He'll be too busy defending himself to come after you. And if he comes after me before that? Maya's expression didn't change. Then we handle it. Evelyn spent the next 4 hours in a room with no windows and a clock that moved like it was drowning. She tried to sleep, couldn't. Tried to read the news on a tablet Maya had provided. Nothing yet. The calm before detonation. At 3:47 a.m., her phone buzzed. Damien, story drops in 13 minutes. Times goes live first. Others will follow. Stay safe. Evelyn's heart was hammering. She walked to the main room where Maya and Jordan were watching multiple screens showing security feeds from around the building. It's happening, she said. Maya nodded. We know. Stay away from exterior walls. At 4 a.m. exactly, Evelyn's tablet lit up. Push notification. New York Times. The headline hit like artillery. Systematic fraud. How elite legal firm Vail and Emerson built an empire on buried victims underneath, a byline, Rachel Chen. Evelyn opened the article with shaking hands. There it was. Everything. Her name. Damien's name. The contracts, the cases. Victim testimony. A photograph of Caleb Mercer looking confident and powerful above text that dismantled him piece by piece. The article was thorough, devastating, surgical. Rachel had verified everything. Cross-referenced contracts, interviewed victims, traced money. She'd even gotten a comment from Vail and Emerson's PR team, a bland denial that read like confirmation. 3 minutes later, the Post's version went live. Different angle, same conclusion. Michael Torres had focused on the FBI corruption angle, Reeves's relationship with Mercer, the compromised investigation, the attempt to weaponize federal power against witnesses. At 4:12, Diana Volkov's network broke into regular programming with a special report. Evelyn watched on one of Maya's screens as Diana walked through the evidence with graphics and timelines that made it look even worse than it was. By 4:30, it was everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, news sites picking up the story and running with it. The response was immediate and massive. Shock, outrage, demands for investigation. Evelyn's phone started ringing. Unknown numbers. She ignored them. But the messages piled up. Journalists requesting interviews, victims reaching out with their own stories, strangers offering support or threats in equal measure. You broke the internet, Maya said, not looking away from her screens. Is that good? Depends on what Mercer does next. The answer came at 5:03 a.m. Cole's radio crackled. We've got movement. 3 vehicles. East perimeter. Maya was on her feet instantly. How many? Can't tell yet, but they're not trying to hide. Evelyn felt her stomach drop. That's Mercer. Probably. Maya pulled her weapon, checked the magazine. Jordan, lock down the entrances. Cole, how long until they reach the building? 2 minutes, maybe less. Evelyn, back room. Now. What are you... Now. Evelyn ran. The back room was smaller, no windows, 1 door. Maya followed her in, shut the door, positioned herself between Evelyn and the entrance. If this door opens and it's not me or my team, you use that. Maya pointed to a pistol on the table. Safety's off. Point and shoot. Don't hesitate. I've never... Then today you learn. Stay quiet, stay down, and pray they're just here to talk. Maya left. The door locked behind her. Evelyn stood in the silence holding a gun she didn't know how to use, listening to footsteps and voices from somewhere below. Male voices. Multiple. Shouting. Then gunfire. Not movie gunfire. Loud, controlled, dramatic. Real gunfire. Sharp cracks that made Evelyn's ears ring even through the walls. 3 shots. 4. A pause. Then more. She pressed herself against the corner, gripping the pistol so hard her hands hurt. The shooting stopped. Voices again, closer now, on this floor. Maya's voice tight with pain. Back room, now! The door flew open. Maya stumbled in, blood on her shoulder, weapon still raised. Behind her, Jordan appeared, dragging Cole, who wasn't moving. They're coming up, Jordan said. 6 of them, maybe more. Mercer doesn't do anything halfway, Maya said through clenched teeth. Can we hold them? Not for long. Maya looked at Evelyn. There's an exit, service tunnel. Goes to the next building over. Jordan will take you. What about you? I'll slow them down. Buy you time. You're bleeding, I'm functional. Jordan, move. Jordan grabbed Evelyn's arm. Come on. They ran. Through a hallway that smelled like dust and old concrete, down stairs that rattled under their feet, into a basement that looked like it had been abandoned for decades. Jordan moved fast, weapon up, checking corners. Behind them, more gunfire. Evelyn didn't look back. The tunnel was narrow, dark, wet with something she didn't want to identify. They ran through it, their breathing harsh and echoing. Evelyn's lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she kept moving because stopping meant dying. They emerged in another basement. Jordan checked his phone. Clear, for now. Where are we? 2 blocks from the safe house. We need to move before... Glass shattered above them. Footsteps. Voices. Go, Jordan said. Pushed her toward stairs. Up, out, don't stop. What about you? I'll hold them. You run. Find Voss. Tell him... He didn't finish. Someone appeared at the top of the stairs. Jordan fired twice. The figure dropped. More appeared. Evelyn ran. Up different stairs, through a door that opened onto a street she didn't recognize. Brooklyn at dawn, gray light and empty sidewalks. She ran until her legs gave out, collapsed against a wall, gasping. Her phone. Still in her pocket. She pulled it out with shaking hands. Dialed Damien. He answered on the first ring. Where are you? Brooklyn, I don't know where. They attacked. Maya's shot. Jordan's, I don't know. Send me your location. I'm coming. She fumbled with the phone, sent the GPS coordinates, leaned against the wall and tried not to vomit from fear and exhaustion. 10 minutes later, a car pulled up. Damien climbed out. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked something other than controlled. He looked furious. Get in. She got in. The car accelerated before her door closed. Where are we going? Somewhere Mercer won't follow. Damien was typing on his phone. Maya's alive, in surgery. Jordan's dead. Cole's critical. The words hit like bullets. They came to kill me. Yes? Because of the story. Because you're the story. Without you, the narrative collapses. You're the witness, the victim, the proof. Damien looked at her. Mercer just escalated from legal warfare to actual warfare. That's desperation. He's going to keep coming. Not if we finish this first. How? He's got resources, connections. He just sent 6 armed men to kill me. And failed. Which means he's burning capital fast. Every move he makes now is visible, traceable. He's losing the shadows. Evelyn's hands were still shaking. What do we do? We end it. Tonight. One way or another. How? Damien's expression was cold as mathematics. We give him what he wants, a meeting, face to face, no lawyers, no intermediaries, just him, me, and you. That's insane. That's the only move he won't expect. He thinks we're running, hiding, regrouping. So we do the opposite. We walk into his territory and end this. He'll kill us. He'll try, but he'll also have to do it himself, in front of witnesses, on camera, and that's a line even Mercer won't cross when the world is watching. Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to say it was suicide, wanted to demand a better plan. But looking at Damien's face, at the absolute certainty that violence was just another form of negotiation. She realized something terrible. She trusted him, not because he was good, not because he cared about her, but because he was exactly as ruthless as Mercer, and sometimes the only way to fight a monster was to become one. When? She asked. Dawn. His office. I'm making the call now. He pulled out his phone, dialed, put it on speaker. Caleb Mercer answered on the third ring. His voice sounded tired, or maybe satisfied. Damien? Calling to surrender? Calling to finish this. You, me, Evelyn, your office. 1 hour. Silence on the line. Then Mercer laughed. It was a cold sound. You want to negotiate? I want to end this before more people die. You should have thought of that before going to the press. And you should have thought about consequences before sending armed men after a witness. That's on camera, by the way. Security footage, your people, your vehicles. The FBI will be very interested. The laughter stopped. What do you want? An end. Clean. Final. One meeting. We walk in, we walk out. Nobody dies. Nobody goes to prison. We all just stop. Why would I agree to that? Because the alternative is federal prosecution, your reputation destroyed, your firm dismantled. You lose everything. Damien paused. Or you meet with us, find a solution, walk away with something. Evelyn could hear Mercer breathing on the other end, calculating, weighing options. 1 hour, Mercer said finally. My office. You come armed, I'll know. You bring anyone except Evelyn, the deal's off. Agreed. And Damien? If this is a trap, I'll make sure you both disappear so completely they'll never find bodies. Same to you. The line went dead. Damien pocketed his phone. He'll be ready, probably has security, definitely has leverage we don't know about. So why are we doing this? Because wars end two ways. One side surrenders or both sides bleed out. I'm offering him surrender. What he does with it determines how this ends. The car turned onto a street Evelyn vaguely recognized. Midtown. Getting closer to Vale and Emerson's headquarters, a building of glass and steel that looked exactly like power built into architecture. What if he doesn't surrender, she asked. Then we make him bleed until he does. They pulled up to the building. Dawn was breaking over Manhattan, painting the glass towers in shades of blood and gold. Evelyn climbed out on legs that barely worked. Damien stood beside her, checking his watch. 58 minutes. You ready? She looked up at the building, at the windows that reflected nothing but sky, at the entrance where Caleb Mercer was waiting to either end this or finish what he'd started 5 years ago. No, she said honestly. Good. People who feel ready usually aren't. They walked toward the entrance, toward the man who destroyed her life, toward an ending that would leave someone buried. And Evelyn realized with cold clarity that she didn't care anymore who that someone was, as long as when the sun rose tomorrow, Caleb Mercer's empire was. The lobby of Vale and Emerson's headquarters was designed to intimidate. Marble floors that echoed every footstep like judgments, ceiling 3 stories high, a reception desk staffed by a woman whose smile was as real as the plastic plants flanking the elevator banks. Everything about the space screamed money and the kind of power that didn't need to raise its voice. Evelyn's shoes clicked against the marble. Each step felt like walking deeper into a throat that was about to close. The receptionist looked up. Her smile didn't waver. Mr. Voss, Miss Hart, Mr. Mercer is expecting you. 42nd floor. No security check, no metal detectors, just a gesture toward the elevators and a look that suggested she knew exactly what kind of meeting this was. The elevator was glass on 3 sides. As it climbed, Manhattan spread out below them, a city of concrete and ambition and people who had no idea that somewhere in this building an empire was about to collapse or be reborn. Damien stood perfectly still. Evelyn's reflection in the glass showed someone she barely recognized, hollow-eyed, exhausted, but standing. Still standing. Whatever happens in there, Damien said quietly, don't apologize. Don't explain. Don't show weakness. Mercer feeds on weakness. I know. Do you? Because 5 years ago you tried to fight him by playing fair. That's what got you destroyed. Evelyn looked at him. I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago. No, you're not. Something that might have been approval flickered across his face. You're harder now. Good. Stay that way. The elevator chimed. 42nd floor. The doors opened onto a reception area even more expensive than the lobby. Everything was white and chrome and aggressive minimalism. A single hallway stretched ahead, ending at double doors made of frosted glass. Caleb Mercer's office. They walked. No one stopped them. No security guards appeared. Just silence and the sound of their footsteps and the distant hum of a city that didn't care who won or lost this particular war. Damien pushed open the doors. The office was huge. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 walls showing Manhattan from a height that made it look like a model. A desk the size of a small car. Shelves lined with law books that probably had never been opened. And standing by the windows, silhouetted against the dawn light, was Caleb Mercer. He turned as they entered. He looked tired. Not defeated. Evelyn had learned the difference. Tired in the way that came from fighting too many battles on too many fronts. Damien? Evelyn. He gestured to chairs in front of his desk. Sit. We'll stand, Damien said. Mercer's smile was thin. Suit yourselves. Though after the night you've had, I'd think you'd want to rest. After the night we've had, I'd think you'd be in custody, Evelyn said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. The night's not over yet. Mercer moved to his desk, sat, folded his hands on the surface like a teacher about to deliver a lesson. You wanted to meet. Here we are. What exactly did you think would happen? We thought you'd realize you've lost, Damien said. Have I? Let's examine the situation. Mercer leaned back in his chair. Yes, you went to the press, created a media firestorm. Very dramatic. But what have you actually accomplished? Some bad publicity, some uncomfortable questions, none of which will result in charges. The FBI has one corrupt agent who will be sacrificed to protect the institution. Agent Reeves will be investigated, prosecuted, probably convicted. But his corruption doesn't prove mine. If anything, it proves I was also a victim of his manipulation. Evelyn felt cold spreading through her chest. That's exactly how it will play. I'll express shock and disappointment, cooperate fully with the investigation, and when the dust settles, I'll be the victim of a rogue agent and an overzealous competitor. He looked at Damien. That would be you. And the contracts? The victims? Disputed interpretations of complex legal language. My clients will say they understood the terms, that any negative outcomes resulted from their own business decisions, not fraudulent contracts. Without clear criminal intent, there's no case. Damien's expression didn't change. You've thought this through. I've been doing this for 20 years. Did you think I wouldn't have contingencies? Mercer stood, walked to the windows. Here's what's going to happen. The media attention will fade. It always does. People will move on to the next scandal. My firm will weather the storm. Some clients may leave, cost of doing business. But Vale and Emerson will survive. I'll make sure of it. And us? Evelyn asked. Mercer turned. You're the variable, which is why we're having this conversation. He moved closer. I'm prepared to offer you a deal, both of you. Walk away. Stop talking to the press. Recant your accusations. In exchange, I'll drop all legal action. You keep whatever assets you have. Go back to your lives. We all pretend this never happened. You're asking us to let you win, Damien said. I'm offering you survival. There's a difference. And if we refuse, then I bury you, both of you. Mercer's voice was calm, professional, like he was discussing weather. Evelyn, you'll face charges for defamation, malicious prosecution, possibly conspiracy with Damien's criminal enterprises. You'll spend the next decade in legal hell, even if you're never convicted. And Damien, I have enough documentation of your questionable business practices to keep federal prosecutors interested for years. Your empire crumbles, your reputation burns, you lose everything. Evelyn looked at Damien. His face showed nothing. But she'd learned to read the absence of expression. It meant he was calculating, weighing variables, planning 3 moves ahead. What's your answer? Mercer asked. Damien pulled out his phone, set it on the desk, tapped the screen once. A voice filled the room. Mercer's voice. From a recording. The beauty of the structure is that it creates perfect legal insulation. You get all the upside of the partnership without any meaningful exposure. Then another voice. Damien's. And if things go wrong? Mercer's voice again. Then the structure protects you. The subsidiary arrangement means your core holdings remain untouchable. If there's liability, it dies at the corporate boundary. You walk away clean. The recording continued. 5 minutes of Mercer explaining exactly how his contracts were designed to trap clients, how the arbitration clauses guaranteed outcomes, how the whole system was built on exploitation disguised as partnership. Mercer's face went very still. That's from our dinner, Damien said, 5 nights ago, when you tried to trap me. I record all my business meetings. Standard practice. That recording is inadmissible. In court? Maybe. But we're not in court. We're in the press. Damien picked up his phone. I sent this to Rachel Chen 30 seconds ago, along with 12 other recordings from other clients, all of them describing the same fraudulent structure, all of them in your voice. Mercer's hands clenched. You're bluffing. Check your news alerts. Mercer pulled out his own phone, scrolled. His expression changed, shock, then fury, then something that looked like acceptance. It's already live, Damien said. New York Times, audio included. By tomorrow, every outlet in the country will have it. You can survive bad publicity. You can't survive your own voice explaining how you defraud clients. The silence in the room felt like a collapsed lung. Mercer set down his phone slowly. You played me. No. You played yourself. I just let you talk. Damien's voice was cold. The meeting, the lawsuit, the FBI investigation, all of it was designed to make you desperate, make you reveal your methods. And you did. Perfectly. So what now? You think this destroys me? I think this ends you. The recordings prove intent, systematic fraud. Every client you've ever represented has grounds for malpractice suits. Your firm collapses, your reputation dies, and yes, eventually, you face criminal charges. Not maybe. Definitely. Mercer looked at Evelyn. This was your idea, wasn't it? The recording. No, Evelyn said. That was all Damien. I just wanted you to pay for what you did to me. He wanted to destroy your entire empire. And you're okay with that? Being his weapon? I stopped caring about being used when I realized I could use him back. She moved closer. 5 years ago, you took everything from me. My career, my reputation, my future. You did it because I was convenient to destroy, because I didn't have power to fight back. You reported fraud, I reported the truth, and you buried me for it. So yes, I'm okay being the weapon that destroys you, because you taught me something important. What's that? That power isn't about being right. It's about being willing to do what the other person won't. Evelyn's voice was steady. You thought I wouldn't fight back, that I'd stay buried, that fear would keep me invisible. You were wrong. Mercer looked between them. So this is revenge. This is consequence, Damien said. You built an empire on the assumption that victims wouldn't fight back. We're proving that assumption fatal. And if I refuse to surrender, if I keep fighting, then we keep releasing evidence, keep talking to the press, keep destroying your credibility until there's nothing left. You can drag it out, make it painful, but the outcome doesn't change. Mercer walked back to his desk, sat down heavily. For the first time since Evelyn had met him, he looked old, tired, human. What do you want? He asked finally. Your firm dissolved, every client notified, every contract reviewed, full cooperation with federal investigators. Damien's voice was flat. And a public admission, on record, that you operated a fraudulent enterprise. That's a prison sentence. Maybe, but it's also closure, clean, final. You admit what you did, face consequences. Some clients might forgive you, some might sue, but at least it ends honestly. Why would I agree to that? Because the alternative is worse. I have enough evidence to keep you in litigation for the rest of your life. Enough recordings to destroy any defense. Enough victims willing to testify now that they know they're not alone. Damien leaned forward. You can control this narrative. Make it about mistakes and redemption. Or I can control it. Make it about a predator who finally got caught. That's not a choice. No, it's not. But it's better than what you gave your victims. Mercer was quiet for a long moment. Then he opened a drawer, pulled out a bottle of scotch and 2 glasses. poured without asking. Drank one himself. You know what the funny thing is, he said. I actually believed I was helping people. The contracts, they were designed to protect my clients, create structure, minimize risk. It worked. For years it worked. Until it didn't, Evelyn said. Until it became easier to control the outcome than trust the process. Until I realized I could guarantee wins instead of just improving odds. He drank again. It happened slowly, one clause at a time, one client at a time, until the whole system was built on manipulation and I couldn't even see it anymore. That doesn't excuse what you did. I know, but it explains it. Mercer looked at her. You really think you're different? You think if you'd had my power, my resources, you wouldn't have made the same choices? I'd like to think I wouldn't. Everyone likes to think that, until they're in the position to choose. Then morality becomes negotiable. Damien stood. We're not here for your philosophy. We're here for your surrender. Mercer laughed. It was a broken sound. Surrender. You make it sound like a war.
It was. You just lost. No, we all lost. You, me, Evelyn, everyone who got caught in this. He set down his glass. But fine. You want surrender? I'll give it to you. On one condition. You're not in a position to negotiate. One condition, Mercer repeated. I cooperate fully, admit everything, help dismantle my own firm, but Evelyn gets her career back. Evelyn felt her breath catch. What? Morrison and Cale. The termination. The fabricated evidence. I'll recant all of it, publicly. Put it in writing. You were right. They were wrong. Your record gets cleared. Why would you do that? Because you were right 5 years ago. You saw the fraud, reported it, did exactly what you were supposed to do, and I destroyed you for it. Mercer's voice was quiet. I can't undo what I did, but I can at least acknowledge it. Give you back what I took. Damien looked at Evelyn. Your call. She thought about it. About 5 years of serving wine to people who'd forgotten she existed. About nights in studio apartments where the heating didn't work. About the crushing weight of invisibility. And about what it would mean to have her name cleared. To walk back into the world as someone who'd been right all along. But she also thought about Morrison and Cale. About the people who'd enabled her destruction. About a system that protected power over truth. I don't want my old career back, she said finally. Mercer frowned. What do you want? I want the truth on record. I want everyone who buried me to face consequences, and I want to make sure this never happens to anyone else. She looked at Damien. We're not just dismantling Vale and Emerson. We're reforming the whole system. Contract transparency, arbitration oversight, whistleblower protections. That's ambitious, Mercer said. That's necessary. Evelyn's voice was hard. You built an empire on making people disappear. I'm going to build one on making sure they're seen. Damien smiled. It was small, but genuine. I can work with that. So can I, Mercer said. He stood, extended a hand. I'll cooperate. Full disclosure. Whatever you need. Evelyn didn't shake his hand. This doesn't make us even. I know, but it's a start. They left him there. Sitting in his office overlooking a city that was waking up to the news that one of its most powerful legal consultants had just admitted to systematic fraud. The elevator ride down felt different, lighter, like gravity had loosened its grip. What happens now? Evelyn asked. Now we execute. Mercer cooperates. Vale and Emerson dissolves. Federal prosecutors build their case. It'll take months, maybe years, but it happens. And us? Damien looked at her. That depends. You want to go back to being invisible? No? Good. Because I have a proposition. I'm listening. I need someone who understands contracts, who can identify fraud, who isn't afraid to fight. He paused. I'm offering you a job, partner, not employee, equal stake in building something better than what we just destroyed. Evelyn should have been suspicious, should have questioned his motives, should have remembered that Damien Voss used people the way other people use tools, but she'd learned something over the past 2 weeks. Power wasn't inherently corrupt. It was just power. What mattered was how you used it. What kind of partnership? The kind where we hold corporations accountable, expose fraud before it metastasizes.
Use the same aggressive tactics Mercer did, but in service of truth instead of profit. You want to be vigilantes. I want to be effective. There's a difference. Evelyn thought about it as they walked through the lobby, past the receptionist whose smile was gone now, replaced by professional panic, past the marble that no longer felt intimidating. Outside, Manhattan was fully awake. Morning rush, people heading to jobs they probably hated, lives that felt small, dreams that had been compressed into survival. She'd been one of them for 5 years, invisible, safe, slowly eroding. "Okay," she said. Damien raised an eyebrow. "Okay?" "I'm in, partner, equal stake, but I have conditions." "Of course you do. We operate legally. No gray areas, no compromised FBI agents, no manipulation. That significantly reduces our options. That's the point. We do this right, or we don't do it at all." Damien considered, then nodded. "Agreed. Anything else?" "I want Maya taken care of. Medical bills. Salary while she recovers. Jordan's family gets compensation. Cole too. Already done. And I want a say in every decision. Real say. Not just consultation." "You'll have it." Evelyn looked at him, at the man who'd used her as a weapon, who'd orchestrated her exposure, who'd put her in danger and called it protection.
"Why are you really doing this?" she asked. "Don't tell me it's about your brother. There's more." Damien was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because I'm tired of building empires alone, tired of trusting no one, tired of fighting wars where everyone's expendable." He paused. "You stood in that office and refused to be destroyed. Twice. Once by Mercer, once by me. That's rare." "So you're collecting rare things now?" "I'm collecting people who don't break when pressure's applied. The world needs more of those." It wasn't friendship. It wasn't trust. But it was honest. And after 5 years of dishonesty, that felt like enough. "Where do we start?" Evelyn asked. "With the list. Every victim Vale and Emerson destroyed. We find them, offer restitution, help them rebuild. That could be hundreds of people. Then we'll be busy." 3 months later, Evelyn sat in an office that didn't feel like a prison. Windows that actually opened, desk that was hers, not borrowed, nameplate that said Evelyn Hart Partner in letters that felt permanent. The work was hard, exhausting. Some days, frustrating beyond measure. They'd identified 63 victims of Vale and Emerson's fraud, contacted 41, gotten 12 to agree to testify. The legal process was slow, bureaucratic, designed to protect institutions over individuals. But it was moving, forward, visible. Caleb Mercer had kept his word. Full cooperation, public admission. His testimony had triggered investigations into 3 other firms using similar tactics. Vale and Emerson had dissolved completely. The building sold. The name erased. Mercer himself was awaiting trial. Federal charges. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Racketeering. His attorneys were negotiating a plea deal. 15 years, maybe 12 with cooperation. He'd accepted it with the same professional calm he'd shown that morning in his office. Some people called it justice. Evelyn called it consequence. The distinction mattered. Agent Reeves had been arrested, prosecuted, convicted, currently serving 7 years in a federal facility. The FBI had launched an internal investigation that resulted in 3 more terminations. Not enough, but something. Morrison and Cale had issued a public retraction, admitted the evidence against Evelyn had been fabricated, offered her old position back. She'd declined, sent them a letter instead, 2 paragraphs explaining exactly why their apology meant nothing without structural reform. They'd ignored it, predictably, but other people hadn't. The Times had run a follow-up piece, then another, then a series. Other victims had started coming forward, not just from Vale and Emerson, from dozens of firms operating similar schemes. The system was starting to crack, slowly, painfully, but cracking. Evelyn's phone rang. "Damien," she answered. "We have a new case," he said without preamble. "Pharmaceutical company. Contract language that looks designed to bury clinical trial data. Might be nothing. Might be another Murcroft situation." "Send me the files." "Already did. Also, we have a meeting tomorrow. Potential client. Whistleblower from a tech company.
Claims her employer is using arbitration clauses to silence harassment complaints. What time? 10 a.m., conference room. I'll be there. She hung up, opened her laptop, started reading the pharmaceutical contract. The language was dense, technical, designed to obscure rather than clarify. But she'd spent 4 years learning to read this language, 5 years remembering it, 3 months weaponizing it. The clause was in Section 14, buried under subsections. Liability limitation tied to data reporting requirements that made disclosure functionally impossible. She'd seen this before. Evelyn pulled up a template, started drafting questions, areas to probe, weaknesses to exploit. The work felt familiar now, comfortable, like muscles she'd forgotten she had. Outside her window, Manhattan moved through its evening routine. Lights coming on, people heading home, a city of millions living separate lives that occasionally collided. She thought about where she'd been a year ago, invisible, serving wine, existing in margins, and where she was now, visible, fighting, building something that might actually matter. It wasn't redemption. Redemption implied she'd done something wrong. This was restoration, taking back what had been stolen and using it better than before. Her phone buzzed, text from an unknown number, "Thank you." Just 2 words, no context. But Evelyn knew what it meant. Another victim, someone they'd helped, someone who'd been invisible and was learning to be seen. She didn't respond, just saved the number, added it to a list that was growing longer every week. The work continued, would continue. Because fraud didn't stop. Power didn't suddenly become ethical. Systems didn't reform themselves. But people could fight back, could name corruption, could refuse to stay buried. Evelyn had learned that the hard way, had been destroyed, had clawed her way back, had become the thing that Caleb Mercer and Morrison and Cale and every other predator feared most. A witness who wouldn't stay silent. A victim who'd learned to be a weapon. A ghost who'd chosen to be seen. 6 months after that, on a rooftop in Manhattan that Damien owned but rarely used, Evelyn stood looking out at the city that had tried to erase her. The party was small. Maya, recovered and back to work. Cole, still in physical therapy but functional. New security team members whose names she was learning. Nadia Cole, who'd successfully prosecuted 7 cases built on the Vail and Emerson evidence. Rachel Chen, whose reporting had won awards and triggered congressional hearings. And Damien, standing beside her. Not as a master of shadows, not as a manipulator, but as someone who'd learned that the strongest empires were built with people who could say no. "You did good work this year," he said. "We did good work. Semantics. Important ones." He smiled. It was small but real. "Fair enough. What's next? More cases, more victims, more fights. You ever get tired?" "Every day. But I also remember what it felt like to be invisible. I'll take tired over invisible." That's the choice, isn't it? Comfort or meaning? For some people. For me, it's just survival. Evelyn looked at him. "You know what I realized?" "What?" "You didn't save me. You gave me tools. But I saved myself." Damien nodded slowly. "I know. That was always the point. Was it? Or did you just get lucky that I survived your manipulation?" "Does it matter?" Evelyn thought about it. "No, I guess it doesn't." The city spread out below them, millions of lives, thousands of stories, hundreds of battles happening in offices and courtrooms and quiet rooms where powerful people made decisions that crushed others. But somewhere in that chaos, people were fighting back, naming corruption, refusing to be erased. Evelyn Hart had been one of them, had been destroyed for it, had learned to stand back up, and now she stood on a rooftop overlooking the city that had tried to bury her, fully visible, fully seen, and finally, completely unafraid. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. Power wasn't about never falling. It was about standing back up after the fall and making sure the people who pushed you never forgot what happened when they tried. The night air was cold. The city was loud. The future was uncertain. But Evelyn Hart was no longer invisible. And that made all the difference. Below them, Manhattan glittered like broken glass. Beautiful, dangerous, full of people fighting their own wars. Some would win, some would lose. But at least now, when they fell, There was someone watching who knew how to help them stand back up. Evelyn raised her glass. To the ghosts who learned to haunt back, Damien raised his. To the buried who refused to stay dead. They drank. The party continued. The city moved on. And somewhere in Manhattan, another waitress was serving wine to powerful men. Another analyst was finding fraud they'd be punished for reporting. Another person was learning that speaking truth could cost everything. But maybe, just maybe, they'd also hear about Evelyn Hart, about the woman who'd been erased and came back, who'd fought an empire and won. Maybe that would be enough to make them speak anyway. Maybe that would be enough to change everything. Or maybe it would just be enough to survive another day. In the end, that was all anyone could hope for. Survival. Visibility. The stubborn refusal to stay quiet when powerful people wanted silence. Evelyn had learned to do all three, and in learning, she'd become exactly what Caleb Mercer had feared most that night in Bellacourt when she'd first spoken up. Not a victim, not a witness, but proof that some people, once destroyed, could rebuild themselves into something stronger than what they'd been before. The party ended around midnight. People drifted home, Maya and Cole to recovery. Nadia to her office, where she probably worked through the night. Rachel to her newsroom, where the next story was already waiting. Damien offered Evelyn a ride. She declined, wanted to walk, needed the air. Manhattan at midnight was different. Quieter. More honest. The mask of daytime productivity stripped away, revealing the city underneath, tired, struggling, but still standing. Evelyn walked through streets she'd learned to navigate as a ghost, past restaurants where she'd once served wine, past buildings where people like her still worked invisible jobs for invisible wages. She reached her new apartment around 1 a.m. Not Queens anymore. Not a studio with broken heating. Something better. Something earned. Inside, she made tea, sat by the window, looked out at a city that was finally looking back. Her laptop was open. Email waiting. 3 new potential cases, a request for an interview, a thank you note from a victim they'd helped 6 weeks ago. The work never stopped. Would never stop. Because corruption didn't sleep, power didn't take vacations, systems didn't reform themselves overnight. But she'd learned something important. You didn't have to win every battle. You just had to keep fighting, keep speaking, keep refusing to be erased. Eventually, enough voices became a chorus. Enough witnesses became a movement. Enough ghosts became an army. Evelyn Hart had been invisible for 5 years. She'd been visible for 1. And in that visibility, she'd discovered something worth more than safety or comfort or the illusion of peace. Purpose. The knowledge that she was using her life for something that mattered, that her scars had meaning, that her survival could help others survive. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't justice. It wasn't even revenge. It was simply this: a woman who'd been destroyed learning to build something better from the ruins. And that was enough. Outside, Manhattan kept moving. Inside, Evelyn kept working. The empire of shadows was burning, and in its place, something new was being built. One case at a time, one victim at a time, one voice at a time, until the ghosts were no longer invisible, until the buried refused to stay dead, until the silence broke completely, and the world finally learned what happened when you tried to erase someone who'd learned to fight back.